Hello and welcome to another GCSE revision video, and in this video we're going to be looking at the trigonometric ratios sine, cosine and tangent. Now for any right angled triangle, one of the angles must be 90 degrees, and we can pick either of the other angles and we'll pick one and call it theta. This is the Greek letter TH. Now, the length that is directly opposite the angle we've chosen is called the opposite. And the length that is touching the angle, the shorter length that's touching the angle, is called the adjacent. And the longest length of the triangle is called the hypotenuse. Now the ratio of opposite to hypotenuse, or that is to say, if you take the opposite and divide it by the hypotenuse, that fraction is called the sine of the angle. And someone has created a series of tables listing the actual values of the ratios of the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. And if we take the adjacent length and divide that by the hypotenuse, again someone's come up with a whole list of values and called it the cosine. And if we take the opposite and we divide it by the adjacent, again, that's a list of values and it's called the tangent. Now you don't have to look up those tables these days because they're actually programmed into pretty much every computer and every calculator and even on the mobile phone apps. Now the traditional way we're taught to memorize this is the word Sohcahtoa, and we're told to learn how to spell it as Sohcahtoa, and that Sohcahtoa stands for sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. If you can remember that, excellent. If not, try to come up with your own little sentence that starts with each letter of the words. So I just gave this a few minutes thought and I came up with sick or healthy could always have the other apple. But pick something, especially if it's silly. The sillier the better. The sillier it is, the easier it is to remember it. But make sure it's your sentence that helps you to remember that sine is opposite over hypotenuse and cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse and tangent is opposite over adjacent. Okay, well, so much for the theory. Let's have a go at putting this into practice. Let's say we're given a right angled triangle and we're told that the hypotenuse is 10 centimetres and the angle is 30 centimetres, and we're asked to find the lengths of the other two sides. Okay, well, the first thing we can find the opposite side, knowing that opposite over hypotenuse is sine theta. So opposite over hypotenuse is equal to sine 30 degrees. So that means the opposite is equal to the hypotenuse times the sine of 30 degrees. So the opposite is equal to 10 centimetres, which is the hypotenuse, and that's times the sine of 30 degrees. And now it's just a case of finding our scientific calculator and typing the numbers in. Okay, so we have our scientific calculator. So the opposite is equal to 10 times, I'm checking that I'm in degrees because I'm going to use a trigonometric function, and then I'm typing in 30 and clicking the sine button, and that comes to 5. So the opposite is just 5 centimeters. Okay, so if we want the other length, this will be the adjacent. We know that the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse is equal to the cosine of 30 degrees, which means the adjacent is equal to the hypotenuse times the cosine of 30 degrees. So the adjacent is equal to the hypotenuse, which is 10 centimeters, so that's 10 times cosine of 30 degrees. And then it's just a case of getting out our scientific calculator. Okay, so we've got a scientific calculator. The first thing I want to do is check that it's in degrees, which it is. And then I can type in 10 times 30 cosine, and that's equal to 8.66. So that's 8.66 centimeters. Okay, so let's say we're given this triangle. In this case, we're given the adjacent, and we're asked to find the other two sides. Okay, well, the first thing we can say is that let's say we want to find the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse, actually, let's not do it that way. Let's do it this way. Let's say the cosine of 60 degrees is equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Now if I multiply both sides by the hypotenuse and divide by the cosine, I can say that the hypotenuse is equal to the adjacent divided by the cosine of 60 degrees. So the hypotenuse is equal to 12 divided by the cosine of 60 degrees. And now it's just a case of getting out our scientific calculator. Okay then, so the first thing we want to do is check that it's in degrees. And now it's just a case of typing in 12 divided by 60 cosine. And that's 24. So the hypotenuse is equal to 24 centimeters. And suppose we want to find this side. Okay, so we want to find the opposite side now. So we'll recall that opposite over adjacent is equal to tan theta. So the opposite is equal to the adjacent times tan theta. In this case, that's 60 degrees. So the opposite is equal to 12 centimeters times the tangent of 60 degrees. And again, it's time for our scientific calculator. Okay, so once again, the first thing we need to do is check that it's set to degrees, which it is. And then we can type in 12 times 60 and tan. And that's equal to 20.78. Actually, 20.78. So this is 20.78 centimetres. Now in an exam you might not be given triangles that easy. You might be asked something like a man stands 12 metres away from a tree and is looking at an angle of 60 degrees at the top of the tree. How tall is the tree? And you would be expected to use your trigonometric knowledge to answer the question like that. In this case you would just see it as a right angle triangle with a length of 12 metres, and you would pretend that the opposite is your tree. I can't draw a tree. That's my impression of a tree. And the top of the tree should be the same height as the top of the triangle. So you'd probably get something like that. Okay, I hope you found this helpful. I'd like to wish you all the best with your revision and all the best with your exams. And I look forward to seeing you in another video.